the time to be here. And I'll do a little bit of a formal introduction of the two of you in a moment. But what I'd like to do is I'd just like to start off with an acknowledgement of country. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country, excuse me, throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Tiny bit of housekeeping. If you're at home and you're juggling cooking dinner, or you've got children running around, or you're running backwards and forth, or you're turning on and you know you can't stay for the whole thing, or if I'm talking to you in the future because you've requested the recording will be sent out in the next 24 hours. I also just like to acknowledge that a lot of people register for these webinars because they're curious or you've got questions. We've got a team on the chat. So something's inspired you to turn up after a long day at school, working and doing your job. Please pop that into the chat. You can always Ishita, that's ISHITA, is also in the chat. If you don't want to pop it in a public question, you can pop that through to her privately and she can pass that over to myself or the panelists. This is a really interactive, very casual conversation. But in terms of the engagement from you, really, really curious about what brought you here tonight, and also extremely grateful to Andrew and Claudia for sharing their journey. I'm Nikki Bonus. I'm the founder of Life Skills Go. I probably won't stay there too long. There's a lot of information on my website. I think if I was to sum up what gets me out of bed in the morning, and I think that's a big one, particularly when we're working in education. The big thing that gets me out of bed in the morning is to ensure that no young person ever falls through the gaps. And I feel a moral responsibility to be part of ensuring that every child is seen, heard, and also responded to, and that we give our young people the best future and the best life that they've got in education as well. I'm going to pop Andrew's bio up, but I always think it's really kind of boring when we just kind of read off the bio. So I'd love, Andrew, if you can just give us sort of a very top level, you've got a really amazing role as the head of wellbeing K-12 at Maronite College. What sort of led you to this role and sort of the highlight reels of your career and, and the role that you're doing now?
Yeah, highlight reel. Well, it feels like yesterday I started. So starting teaching in early 2000s out of the foot of the mountains at Kingswood High School as a PE teacher, and probably thought that's where I thought I'd stay for the duration of my career. Fortunate enough to work with some excellent educators at the foot of the mountains doing a lot of work in the wellbeing space. Sometimes that was as a result of the need there, which is there is a lot of need in areas of low socioeconomic areas. So I had the opportunity to engage with wellbeing at the foot of the mountains, be involved in a lot of programs that was being run by the current head of wellbeing at the time. And it really sort of just captured my interest in supporting the whole child. And probably early on in my career, I realized that teaching is one thing, and we get the kids at the key point of their day from 8 till 3, really valuable time. And it's not always just about the academic side of things. So academia is absolutely important, but it's not so much just the marks, the results, it's the lifelong learning. And I saw a lot of that lifelong learning out that way, which sort of pushed my career path towards probably away from curriculum a little bit. So I was leaning towards potentially leading a faculty in the PDHPE space, which I did do for a little bit, but then I always seemed to get pulled back into wellbeing, just because like you, Nikki, I'm passionate about making that difference, making an impact in a person's life, and that impact that we can make even in one child's life, that 5 years down the track, 10 years down the track, they still carry that with them. And then everyone that they come across on their own journey, they're passing that on. So for me, being able to work as a PDHPE teacher at Kingswood High School and progressing through to being a year advisor and then a part of the leadership team there, and then branching off into other schools, systemic and independent ones, and now being in Maronite College, where I feel like we've got the right team behind us, the leadership there, from Sister Margaret to Mr. Asma, Eli Asma, who's the head of college, that they've given us the scope to really make a difference in children's lives. And that's what really excites me. And to work along with someone like Claudia, who's going to introduce herself in a moment, who is going to be she won't talk herself up, but I will. The difference that she's making in that space is tremendous. So as I said, it's funny how your career sort of progresses. But for me, I probably didn't realize I was going to be here at this point, but it's all just laid out that way.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I am just going to jump in there very quickly, Claudia. I think that, you said a couple of things, and I won't go too deep on them, but one of the thing was your team. And I've had the privilege of working with you during the evaluation stage. I've had the privilege of sitting with lots of different members of the team and then working with the whole school as a whole. And your team, and particularly the two of you, are remarkable the way that you plan and you evaluate and you execute. And Claudia, you've got to have one of the most amazing organization skills. It's like herding cats and you just deliver it all and everyone turns up. So same question to you. Just would love to hear, very similar or anything that stands out for you. And I think you two have got this really beautiful, rich sort of career path that sometimes I think, particularly because the people that log into our webinars are educators, but often they sort of stay in the same role and they think they've got to go to principalship or, there's lots of other areas. So passing over to you, Claudia.
Thanks, Nikki. For me, my role in education has changed so much since I first started to where I was now. When I first graduated university, I thought, my goodness me, what have I gotten myself into? I started off at a very prestige independent college, and in my second year of teaching, I got chucked in the deep end and asked to be the assistant head of department. And the head of department at that time then took long service leave, a very extended long service leave. So second year out, I had to learn to manage a team of which were much older than me and work with different things. I was still trying to get my feet across. Then I fast forwarded a couple of years and I moved on to a different school. And that's the school I think that kind of not only shaped me as an educator, but more as a person in terms of relationship and connection. That school I worked at in terms of Western Suburbs area, and they were a very small school, but maybe I would say 90% of the student body was English as a second language, and a lot of them were refugees escaping war-torn Syria and stuff like that. So when I worked with this small community, I thought to myself, when I first started, I got the shock of my life. But then I realized the way I can connect with these kids if they could see that I'm willing to learn from them. And in 8 years that I worked in that school, those children became really shaped who I was. And I grew a greater appreciation for connection. And at that school, I was the head of TAS as well as the head of junior school. It was a small school, so we wore multiple hats. So I got the opportunity to work in curriculum and wellbeing. And for the last maybe 8 years of my career, that's where I've kind of been torn in and out of year advising and then curriculum, year advisor, curriculum. But now at Maronite College, I was actually an ex-student, and I did not think that when I graduated school that I'd come back, that I'd be back. I always think that it's always good to find your own feet. Sometimes you've got to put yourselves in environments that are unfamiliar so that you can find growth. But it's good to be back. It feels like you kind of come back home. But there has been such great opportunity for me to kind of work with a team that's really vision focused. We're really there to help that holistic child, and now my role in engagement I think that's where I think I found that jackpot in that sense. This is where I find myself really working and enjoying what I do.
No, so you just made me smile a lot while you were sharing that. Thank you, like a lot. And I could really feel your own passion around what you do and what you bring. So, and how beautiful that you've gone back to your own school. I didn't know that. So thank you. So I suppose just before we dive into the webinar, it'd be great to get a little bit of a context about the school, where it's placed, your enrollment numbers, sort of, what your context looks like. But also a little bit around, also because I'm a bit privy to your information, I know that bringing in wellbeing and sort of the framing of wellbeing in a very new context. I'd love, and maybe you two can bounce off each other. I won't direct it to either or, but I'd love to hear a little bit more around where you were, and maybe you can do timelines and things like that, but at the beginning, so just walk us through what you were looking for. That was a lot of questions. If you just go, Nikki, just overwhelm me, just put your hand up and I'll throw another one at you.
That's fine. As you said, I think we'll bounce off each other. So, Claudia, do you want me to throw it out, or you want to describe what the college is?
That's fine. Go for it.
Okay, so to give you what you would read on our website, which is true, so we are a Catholic independent school in Harris Park, catering to students from kindy to year 12, and our current enrolments are just over 1,300. It's projected that we'll probably be around about the 1,600 mark within the next, say, 5 years. We are going 5 stream again next year in kindy, so we're definitely a community that is growing. In regards to the diversity of our community, we are predominantly Maronite Catholics, and majority of our students hail from Lebanon. So we do have very strong ties to the Maronite Sisters of the Holy Family, who back in 1973 founded the college, and that was based underneath the actual cathedral, so Our Lady Lebanon Co-Cathedral in Harris Park, and then migrated across the road to where MCHSF is currently at the moment. And we're only growing. So we've opened up a kindy in year 1 section on the opposite side of the road. So we're definitely a growing community, but very much a faith-based community. Faith for us is sits right up there with all the pillars. So academia, wellbeing, faith is definitely an extracurricular now, or engagement, as Claudia's touched on. So yeah, so we are very much a small community, but also a big community in that sense.
And how did, like, and this might not be relevant to your community, but how did wellbeing, like the context of wellbeing, sit within the college previously?
I think I can. So I started 6 months just before Andrew started. So when I started in the curriculum space. I was filling in as the head of TAS, and knowing from where I had come from and how important really solid, intentional wellbeing programs and frameworks are to achieve, for that child to experience success beyond test scores, which are important, yes, but not everything. I noticed a lot of, it was very secluded, like a primary and a secondary space, and no overarching goal, no overarching as to where we want to be. And we were doing so many little things and I questioned. I remember once sitting in a department meeting, I said, just a side topic, how we are doing so much. How do we know whether it's resonating with the kids? That's one. And then what's the impact of what we're doing? Are we adding value, or are we ticking boxes? And those type of questions started to initiate conversations. And when Andrew came in, and I moved out of curriculum and into pastoral care, that was my role before it was changed. These are the things that we started to surface and talk. We worked a lot with our brands and marketing manager, because that's who we are. Who are we at MCHF? What does it feel like? What does it look like? And that's what we were trying to shift towards.
And the reason I asked that was more because we often hear, particularly with faith-based, or faith-based schools, it's, how do we bring this in? It's kind of, and it's often, I love what you just said. How do we then measure it? What's the impact of it? What's the framework? And, I'd love to hear more from you, Andrew, around, so you must have had a vision, and I'm sorry, I'm giving you that kudos there, but now I don't know, maybe it was Claudia who had the vision. Someone had the vision. To want to have a framework. And what was it that you were initially looking for when we first met?
Yeah, well, I actually remember the first time we met, and I said kudos to Claudia. We were having a conversation about the difference between reactive wellbeing and proactive wellbeing. I think absolutely every educator, especially if you work in that wellbeing space, that you want to be proactive, but it was really hard to be proactive and be targeted proactive because in curriculum, you obviously have your quantitative data. The qualitative data, which you need from wellbeing, is really hard to come by. So I still remember going into that meeting, and you asked me the question, and we were already on that journey talking about impact. And probably one step back about that. So Claudia, she was in the Department of Education. That's exactly what we look for, and that was my background. So measuring the impact, So really targeted approaches, and that's off the back of my work with the school excellence framework. So coming from a Department of Education with the school excellence framework and the wellbeing framework for schools and students, so connect, succeed, thrive, that was always in the back of my mind. So when I've landed at MCHF, I'm like, great, I've got people like Claudia, I've got other people who we can pull together here to design a framework. And that's why we've spent a lot of our energy last year designing the framework, which is now up and running, which is our student wellbeing framework, where we can now link everything we do to one space to go, well, this links with our domains. So that first meeting when we sat down, you said, okay, well, why do you want to do this? And I started talking about the data and the quantitative data. I just saw that light bulb go off in your head, and you're like, you know what? We want to work with this school because they're not just saying we just have something we want to do, but it's targeted, it's measured. And that's what I am absolutely loving about where we're sitting as a college at the moment, because when we make a decision, and as I said, I loved being at Kingswood High School, and because we're out there, we had a lot of funding. So we would throw money at all these different initiatives and all these different programs, and the kids would engage for that 2 hours and they'd love it and they'd walk out. And then a week later, they'd forget about who the presenter was and what it was about. So to find something that we could integrate in, it's not a one-off program. It's not even an initiative. It is embedded into the culture of the school, and we can embed it into our framework that gives us data that we can be reflective on to say, you know what, we missed the mark there. We need to actually change our tact for this cohort of kids, or this group of 20 students, giving us that power off the back of the framework and working with Life Skills Go. It's a really exciting time, because the next step from here is we're designing our version of a MTSS, which is the multi-tiered support system. And that, for me and for Claudia, we're looking at, all right, what are we doing for all students, some students, and then the few students? So again, this tool that you provided us and that we've grabbed with both hands and not going anywhere is facilitating that to occur.
I really, again, both of you, I remember that I was filling in for one of my staff members. I wasn't even meant to be going to that meeting. And I remember walking away, because I don't know if I ever told you this story, but we've been in the space of social emotional learning and wellbeing for, I bow my head down, nearly 20 years now. And that's a long time. And I remember working exactly like what you were saying. We were across about 800 schools. And I remember I kept saying to groups of schools and clusters and principals, how are you measuring the work that we're coming in? Like, we're delivering programs back in those days. And we had our own surveys, and so did every other wellbeing provider that they were coming in. But there was no, how do we measure the longitudinal benefit? And then how do you know how the young people are arriving? And they'd all look at me and they'd go, oh, well, we've got attendance and we've got behavior and we've got the Tell Them From Me surveys and we've got anonymous surveys. And I looked at them and I went, we need more. We need to be able to hold something and look at it. And also wellbeing, as everyone on this call knows, is it's not like any other KLA. We can't just pack in resilience, or we can't just pack in things and go, oh, geez, life won't touch you anymore. You're going to be fine. Like, life continues to happen to all of us. And if we can measure what we're doing, and also measure when young people might not have the words, but they're starting to fall because something's happening that we don't know about, and begin to notice them. And also begin to look at even what we're putting all this time, money, and energy into programs, is it working? Is it not working? And I think it's a really big turning point, because the culture of education, I sort of feel like now after nearly 2 decades, I can say this, is we think we've got a problem, therefore we're going to grab a program, therefore we're going to run the program, bang, done. And you mentioned it before, tick. And, that whole being able to have data and be able to have it so it is preventative is really important. I suppose this leads in, and again, I'm just going to throw it, you two work so well together, but, and I do know that Claudia is the organizer behind you, so I'm just going to give her a big shout out here. But one of the things that I noticed was you had a very planned approach, and I'd love to hear how this sort of was introduced to the school, so it wasn't just a leadership initiative, but rather that you took the school on a journey.
I'm happy to jump in here. Okay. I think I saw the value. I think I spoke to, I'm not sure if his name was Jason. Is that someone I had spoken to?
James.
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 James. Okay.
James.
Almost there. When I
You've
had
done well remembering that from a long
when I had
time
that
ago.
conversation with James about 2 or 3 years ago, I think now it is, I came across from this idea that we want, if I'm working now in this role of engagement or pastoral as it was back then, I want to be able to stretch this program K to 12 where it, or come up with things that are based off what our kids tell us they need, not based off what we assume they need. And I think that's a big thing with young people these, and I mean, I have sisters who are going through school right now, and often they'll come home to the dinner table and say, they did this for us again, and this is for us, but that's actually not what we want. Like, so then those conversations about, what is it that our kids actually need rather than what are we assuming, and know that no child is the same as the other, and no cohort is the same as the other. They go through different ages with different things that they bring to the table, whether that's at home or they're at school. So one of the big things that when we wanted to do and introduce this to our staff, noting that a lot of our teachers, we have such a vast range. We have a bunch of new scheme teachers. We've got teachers who've been there who've even taught me.
Wow.
Yeah, so there we have that large range. So bringing something new in, I wanted it to land well. And for us, and for my observations with our community, is when we present something because it talks to our kids and in our community, it builds a lot of resignation. So we worked by selecting one cohort to start with, and we ran a trial period with them for a whole term. We focused on two things: build the habit of check-in, validating that every check-in is valid, and engaging the kids who are not checking in as just as important. Like, why are you not? What is the hesitation? They're those three areas that we focused on. And for over 10 weeks, we were able to paint a picture of a cohort and actually identify kids who would have slipped under the radar, who are now on like high-risk plans because of the information or the trends we were able to pick up with Life Skills Go. So that's what we started with first. We started with one cohort. We used that over a 10-week time without informing anyone else. And then when we were ready to launch to staff, the what was really aligned to our school mission and values. If we say we are a college that accompanies our students, then that's on every aspect or every part of that their journey that influences their learning, whether that's their spiritual, physical, social, emotional well-being, all of that together. That's that true accompaniment, not just because they can get an A grade or a C grade or whatever that might be. Then when we rolled this out and we were able to present to staff, and bless Ryder, he came out and worked with us as well. And he was able to show where something like just checking in and a consistency, how that paints a big picture for us to be a lot more proactive and present. And I think that's, as the school then changed from primary to secondary to K to 12, that demand for presence really increased. So whilst we can't physically be there, we were able to track and see and kind of distribute support where it's needed. And that's been kind of that journey. So we've now gone into K to 10 with our check-ins. Our kindy kids love it. They get really excited. Some classes, I've been having conversations with their teachers, have done check-ins in the morning and then in the afternoon. And they've noticed that some kids over consistent days, we're checking in a lot more anxious after break times. And that initiated a conversation. Those kids actually feel very uncomfortable and socially awkward in that sense in the playground. So they've been directed to go to social groups, which is an indoors in the learnings. So just by doing that one extra layer of check-in over a consistent amount of days, they were able to pick up that pattern. And just the idea is just to initiate a conversation. It's one conversation that maybe would have not been had, but that one conversation that can allow us to be more proactive than reactive. And that's where our journey is at the moment. We focus now on three things. I say to the team, we want to build a habit. If anything's going to work, it's going to take time, and be patient with it. And I understand we're not going to respond to every single need ASAP. That's not practical. But over time, and when we start to see stories, then we are able to pivot programs to kind of tailor and talk to what our kids are kind of sharing through life skills. I've seen a huge intake in the journaling feature, which is really great.
Wow.
Yeah. especially for some of our students who I know are on like on a plan. And when I check the dashboard, it'll say you've got 47 journals pending. It's great. Like, you know, even if that's an avenue to tell or talk, that's something that they now have that they didn't have before.
And I think going right back to where, and thank you for that, I think going right back to where you started talking and you were sharing about your sister still being at school. One of the things that we didn't mention when we're talking about, you know, how do we measure well-being around that attendance, behaviour and observation is there wasn't any way to include student voice into that equation previously. And when you were talking about accompanying and those values of your schools and the mission of your school, and I think the way that you described, you know, our young people come to school, we just tell them all day, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, but we don't ask them. And,
Yeah.
you know, we ran a webinar with Dr. Mark Williams a couple of months ago, who's a leading neuroscientist. Actually, I think I popped that through to you. And he talked about, you know, young people won't learn from people they don't like and they don't trust. And to begin to, like, we go right back to Andrew like this from the New South Wales, you know, sense of belonging. But it's a word that's bandied around, but it's actually underpinned with a huge amount of research. And there's a lot of evidence, a lot of science, and a lot of neuroscience around if we don't have connection, if we don't have a place where we feel seen, and you know, we unpack those check-ins, having your young people come in using their own voice, it's not asking anything of the teachers, the young people are inputting it, your data's done for you, your dashboards are done for you, but what it's giving them is the ability to be seen. And when we think about Dan Siegel and his work and the work that underpins this, if we can see them in a different way too, not for maybe the little colourful way they displayed their needs without their words the day before. But
Yeah.
if we can truly see them and see them you use the word holistically, and just validate them, you know, just validate them. It's not about getting a fire truck and running at every emotion. It's like, what, you know, the system will pick up those trends. It will show you things over time. But more than that, how do we see every young person? And how do we then, if they feel seen, they feel safe, they feel secure, and then, miracle, they begin to learn to self-regulate. And I think there's two parts that we often, so I'm kind of having a ramble, I'll get off my soapbox in a moment, but there's two parts here. We can often get caught up in, you know, yes, schools need data, and yes, we have a huge amount of data, and yes, we're, you know, and thank you for being part of our surveys and, you know, all the things, like there's a lot that we're doing to then what do we do with that data, and, you know, we've got all those things. But let's come back to, we're in the business of young people, and we're in the business of teaching, and we're in the business of relationships. And I think, you know, drop the mic when we walk into a school, everything, you know, everything about schools are about relationships and giving voice to our young people. I just spoke a lot there, Andrew. Sorry.
You know what? I'm glad you said it because I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about relationships. So for me, the biggest win out of everything that Claudia just mentioned is we always talk about building the capacity of staff. I feel like we're building the capacity of our staff to have honest conversations and to build rapport with the student sitting there in front of them, because sometimes a student might check in is upset, and we're upskilling that staff and just sort of pushing that staff member in the direction who maybe might not normally ask a question but might leave it to the leader of wellbeing in year 8. But they'll go up and they'll just very candidly say, are you okay? And that little check-in with a child, one, that child's then validated that, you know, that wow, this adult who's in here with me every day for my homeroom has noticed that I'm might be a little bit off today. And whether it's because they've checked the screen or whatnot, but there's still that connection for that relationship. And we've seen that. So the year 8 cohort that we started with last year, or this year, we've seen the strength, like the strengthening of those connection of those homeroom teachers to those students, just because those students know that that's a safe space for them, and the staff members feel empowered to, hey, I can actually have a conversation with a student that's not based around curriculum, or I'm not giving them a hard time because they haven't charged their laptop, but I can actually get into a conversation with a child who might just need a chat, just need to check in. So building the capacity and the rapport, it all comes back to relationships. If teaching is relationships, but above all, it is relationships.
Completely agree. And I think you touched on something really powerful there. There was an interesting conversation I was having on another panel where I sometimes think that as adults, we get in the way with our thinking about emotions and about what emotional literacy is because we didn't have that when we were growing up. You know, it was, how are you? Great. How are you doing? Fine. What are you doing? Tired. You know, we didn't know the power. We didn't know what it meant. We didn't know it for the capacity to even be able to learn. We didn't know that a dysregulated young person couldn't concentrate. Like, there's a whole lot of things that we didn't know. And this group that we were chatting on this webinar the other night, and this principal who was rolling it out, there was another person saying, oh, you know, we have to explicitly teach all emotions before we start doing the check-in. And this other person said, why? And I said, my husband's still learning to identify his emotions. Like, we're all still learning. Like, it is that daily practice of, I think we underestimate young people. We know that they want to connect. We know that they want to be seen. And we can see that in behavior at times when they don't have the way to be able to ask for their needs to be met. Sometimes they have really colorful behavior and yet lift the lid on the behavior. They're just wanting to get something, or they're trying to say something that they just don't have the words for. So it's an incredibly powerful thing that you know, embedded and put into a school. Before we move on, I thought we touched on many things tonight that are incredibly valid, but schools notoriously have a habit, and, you know, again, when we were delivering in-school programs, you know, schools have a habit of grabbing the next shiny diamond of, yep, we're going to have that program, we're going to throw it in, we're going to throw it out. And I think they're our poor teachers as well. Like, it's, you know, they're often running behind things. It's like, oh, we're changing this again. Oh, someone is presenting a new program. How are you, you know, in terms of, because I know that, like I said to you, look, you know, 3 years, like first year, like, you know, first year's really kind of getting your parameters, it's feeling into it. As you're sort of now leading into that second year, what did the first year teach you, and why do you think that you need to take a school on a journey for longer than 1 year?
Claudia? No, I'm just asking because I talk. Well, I'm happy
Yeah.
to talk,
Yeah,
but can I say
I'm
I'm always
smiling.
told that I talk too much, so I'm just going to be polite because Claudia does tell me that all the time. So I'm giving her the opportunity. That's what I'm doing.
Thanks, Nikki. I think the year one taught us that less is more. Actually,
Mhm.
that sometimes we need to peel back, take 3 steps backwards, understand that full horizon of the landscape that we're working with, and then take baby steps. And baby steps is okay. As long as those steps that we're taking, the decisions we're making, I found what resonated really well for our staff is this in line with what our kids need? And that's important. And that's where we wanted to capture authentic student voice. So yes, so that when we are introducing this now, we've come to a position to say we are doing this in wellbeing, or we're doing this in engagement, or this in pastoral, because our data of our students is telling us this. And something really exciting that's come about this year is our parent learning lounge. So we've brought the parents along on this journey, and the topics that I use or I look for or I provide speakers to present to are based off what we're seeing from that life skills go. So we saw a huge spike, and it continues to be a spike, of kids in emotion, heightened sense of emotion because of an online issues. And especially in this digital age, that's constantly becoming a thing. So yes, we're doing little strategies and workshops to work with our kids. But a lot of the things that are happening when they bring that to schools, because it's actually happened at home, in the bedroom, or closed behind closed doors. Mum and dad are working longer hours, you know, cost of living is high. And so the kids are spending more time on their screens and then bringing heavier and heavier baggage to school, and that's impacting their readiness to learn. So we then able to target strategies. I worked partnerships with our local police, Australian Federal Police, and we were able to educate parents in that sense. And a lot of them just came back saying, oh my goodness, I thought I knew, but now I really know what my child is exposed to and how that's impacting their learning. So that's been one of the most biggest wins for us. Just pull back on some of the things that we don't know if they're working or not because we don't have the data to measure. And then use what we do have to target what our kids need and then bring those parents along to the journey. That then relieved a lot of pressure from the staff too, because yes, whilst it is, you know, the teacher's role is there to support the child in their learning and their well-being, and it's not just the leader of well-being's job. Well-being is everyone's business, really. It also empowered the parents and brought them on the journey, because at the end of the day, they'll leave us and then they'll go home to mum and dad or whoever's looking after them. And we wanted to make sure that those messages we were sending almost matched or correlated to what's being done at home.
And I think, you know, going back to that comment about a relationship, when a young person enrolls in a school, you get the family, you get the community, you get the extended community. And you're right, well-being is everyone's responsibility. And there's a very different language when we have the data, or we can print out a report and we can sit down with a family and we go, Andrew just told us this, versus we think Andrew is. And that connection point, particularly if we look at the fragility of parenting today, you know, we talk about the contemporary issues that our young people are facing, but also, you know, I'm a parent. I didn't go through any of this. It wasn't in, you know, we just went out in the afternoon, got told to come home when the lights went out, you know, it was. So there's a sensitivity and a fragility, and there's also a lot happening, like you mentioned, behind closed doors, or there's a lot, you know, there's a lot more happening. And I think that bringing community together and working together in partnership for solutions with new contemporary ways versus old ways, I think is really critical. Particularly for our poor little families at time too. Like I was witness to a group of beautiful young colourful boys who were getting up in the middle of the night and they were gaming together, and the parents had no idea, absolutely no idea. And the principal brought these families in because someone told, and blah blah blah. And the horror of this family, like they just couldn't believe that these young people were so, you know, getting up, gaming all night, exhausted, falling over. So
Yeah, and you know, that's the thing, especially in the digital age, like Claudia just touched on, knowing where to channel your energy has been really empowering for our staff. So off the back of that, even yesterday, we delivered a PL to our staff around what they know about all the different things
wow.
happening, and what we're talking about, going from phishing scams and all the way through to deep fakes, which is going to become a real issue in all schools. It's not just our school. So seeing the kids where they're at with that, having the real-time data, that even like you mentioned, they're coming to school tired, and finding out that it's tired because they're at home on their phones in those closed doors while their parents think they're asleep, having that again to act on is tremendous. And to go back to what you're talking about, for me, life skills goes in integration. So as I said, it's not something that is going to come now and then a couple of years it's going to go away. It's an integration to where we're heading as a college, which integrates into our framework. And you touched on student voice. So student voice is huge. That is one of our domains that we want to push. So it's that consolidation of everything that we really, really want to hold true to without overloading our staff. Because I know that when we did mention, and when Claudia we were pushing life skills go to staff, that I still remember we looked around and they all went, oh, here we go, another thing. And I feel like a lot of schools and a lot of teachers do feel that way, because the amount of red tape that we have nowadays is ridiculous. We do know it's a teaching game. So we do know that we need to have all our different documentation, all our different annotations. It's the way that it's the job now. So we were cautious when we came in how to frame that, because staff members, and that's probably why we tried it with that one year group, one cohort initially, because we needed other advocates who have tried it in our school to say, hey, this isn't more work for you. Because we did have a list, I still remember, and Claudia jump in here, we had a teacher, when they heard we were going to bring this in, they sent us through 15 things that they have to do every morning. It'd be, I have to check uniform, I have to this, I have to read that. And they're like, how do you give me another thing now? So now you've given me 16. So then when we went through the process and they realized, oh, we're not actually creating more work for you. We're just allowing you to structure your time in there for that 15 minutes a little bit more streamlined to get the results that we need, the data that we need. And in the long run, you're going to see that it's going to benefit you and the school holistically. So when this all started and we had all these different programs, we sat down and we did an internal audit to go, okay, well, these programs are pretty similar here. We'll move those ones aside. They don't align with what we're trying to do with our framework. That doesn't align with the data that we're going to pull from Life Skills Go. So let's just put that one, park that one for now, and just really consolidate and focus our time and energy, which is always stolen. Like, we've got partial, we're very fortunate at our college to have pastoral on a Friday for an hour and to have homerooms for 20 minutes. But even having that on paper, we know that we don't always get that time. So having a really strategic mindset about when we do have that time, what we're going to use it for, having these tools in place, this integration in place, allows us to actually do that without overloading staff.
And I think that, we always say that to schools. Like, it's interesting because I know people think we're lying when we say to them, we want you to go so slow. And I think I said this to you guys. No, really slow. And you're like, yeah, we've got it. And we're like, no, really slow. Because without our baseline data, but also without taking our teachers on a journey and our students, things fall over. And I don't think there'd be a teacher in the world that, wouldn't want to know what percentage of readiness to learn in their classroom is this morning, and what little young people are turning up with. And if someone's little known to being a little bit, coming in a little bit heightened, or something might have happened the night before, there wouldn't be a teacher that wouldn't want to know that first thing in the morning. And I think making sure that the language of why we're doing it, exactly like what you did, why we're doing this, and that it's all student-led, that they don't have to do anything, because they do have a busy job. They have been asked to do a lot. And I think it's incredibly important that the whole community comes along on that journey. Has there been, I'd love to hear if there's been stories of things that you've been able to intervene with if you didn't have real data, that you wouldn't have known at all.
Yeah, I can probably talk specifically to that. So in my role, which is wellbeing and behaviour, a lot of the time, even being as proactive as I can, it is reactive. And when I'm getting involved in these conversations with parents and having to have really hard conversations, it's about the wraparound care for that child. So without giving specifics, obviously, but when we first rolled that out with that year 8 cohort, there were, I would say, 2 or 3 students that would normally have run under the radar for areas, and we were talking about potential self-harm, potential mandatory reports, being able to get ahead of that, have really safe conversations with that child, and then bring the parents in, have safe conversation with that child. I'd hate to think if we didn't catch those 3 children where they'd be now. So for me, and on my level and where on my spectrum or my plane where I'm working with, unfortunately, a fair bit in that reactive wellbeing, that high impact wellbeing, that facilitation of the wraparound care. As I said, without having that there, I feel like we may have missed those children, which I think a lot of schools do. And it may have been something that with that year 8 student might have gone under the radar for the next 4 years, and then they've left our college, and then they're suffering with something that we may have been able to address. And fortunately we have, and I can happily say that those students and those families are very receptive to receiving help now. Prior to that, they were like, no, there's nothing wrong, because the child was suffering in silence. There might have been this stigma attached to it with mum and dad. You go, oh, no, that's not a real thing. But once we've sat them down and had a really safe conversation off this data and be able to pull this up and say, well, your child's actually checked in 60% of the time upset about this. It's tough conversation, but it's real time data and impact that you can use off the back of it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think, Claudia, I'd love to hear how you're using, you mentioned about, looking across your grades and sort of adjusting and adapting. And, again, you don't have to go too deeply, but how is being able to have data in your hands adaptively, in real time or across a term or in reflection, helping you with your sort of strategic goals or what you need to do for the school?
This year, when my role changed from pastoral to engagement, one of the things that I kind of wanted to do is build some consistency and some common ground in what we're doing. So we established a pastoral program, K to 12, and it used to only just be 7 to 12. And with that came in after the rollout of the Life Skills Go, so that we have those targeted workshops or opportunities, even if they were just became opportunities for us to intervene outside curriculum and syllabus to respond to our kids' needs. That's been the biggest thing. So we've been able to, based off the conversations we've been having with students, so Andrew and I work with the same team, but I come in from, let's say, an initiative or engagement perspective. A lot of the times when I'm having these conversations with these leaders in those spaces, and even in their homeroom teachers who are also leaders of that classroom, it's been really empowering for them to kind of bring to the table, actually, I'm noticing these trends in my cohort or in my homeroom, and providing the teachers with the support and the avenue to be able to feel empowered to take on different activities or initiatives that will respond to that 20 or 25 kids that they have. So we've kind of narrowed down everything that we try to do in our pastoral session to 4 areas of gratitude, empathy, mindfulness, and emotional literacy. And what that looks like in kindy versus year 12 is going to be different. And even in year 12 and the different homerooms that they have and the different collaborative kids, that might change. So that's been really, because all of the things that we're starting to see, the incidents we were reading, the trends we're picking up in Life Skills Go, and the conversation I've been having with parents, especially now, more so this year, a lot more involved in our parent community. It comes down to those things, that they're under-equipped in that their ability to, tap into some resilient strategies or put themselves in other people's shoes to get a better understanding, or build the courage and understanding and actually identifying what it is that they're feeling and how and who can help them. So that's been where we've gone, and we are just on surface level in this sense. Shifting that mindset does take time, and I've learnt more recently that that's okay. I'm very much process, like, get it, okay, let's go next. But in this space, you kind of have to put your foot on the brake and actually accept that stuff does take time, but it's persistent. So being committed to that long-term goal, I suppose. And especially now, it's an exciting time for our kindy kids this will be that habit that they will carry through for the next 10 or 12 or 13 years of their schooling, is where I think we'll start to really see the fruit of that.
I feel extremely excited about your young people that are coming into an incredible community, not only within your teaching community, but also in the collaboration with families. I think that's, the partnership with families is just incredibly important. It's called community. I've got last 2 questions. The time has just gone. I'm just sat here smiling. I'm going to have to massage my cheeks after this webinar. Whenever I'm with you two, you always make me smile. It's really lovely to see both of you. Why do you believe that it's no longer or why do you believe that it's real-time data is critical today? Why is it no longer optional for schools?
Did you want to start off, Andrew?
Oh, look at you two, so polite.
No, no.
I'll give you a chance.
I just think that when we're talking about measuring impact, and I'll go back, and I know it's a term that is ingrained in me from the 16 years or 18 years in the department, but having that ability to use the data then and there, potentially put out a spot fire that might cause issues in the future. It could be something really small. It might be something that a child is dealing with and they think that they can just push down and move on with. We don't want that. I had a conversation with a young lady the other day where something had happened, and her response to that was, "Sir, don't worry about it. I can deal with it." And I'm like, okay, you may be able to deal with it now, but is that something how often do you think about this concern? And she goes, whenever it comes up, I just think about something else. I can deal with it. I'm strong enough to do that. And to have a conversation with her, and this is off the back of the data that came out off Life Skills Go, to have a conversation with her saying, okay, that's okay that you've got this resilience in you, that you feel like you can push through a struggle, but we don't want you to suffer in silence. We are here to empower you to build your resilience, but also to empower you to find your voice, to reach out when you do need help, because in the future, it's not always, you don't have it mapped out. It's not always as easy. Like when you get married and God willing have kids, and then you've got mortgages, and then you've got jobs, you've got stresses in life that undoubtedly are coming for our children, even our kindies. So before we know it, they're probably going to be having their own kids and bringing kids again. And hopefully I'm not teaching by that time, because I think I'll be fairly long in the tooth. But that real-time data, that real-time impact, let's address it now before it becomes a trend, before it becomes an epidemic, before it becomes going, wow, you know what? I wish we'd have acted on that. We noticed that back then, but we didn't do anything about it. No. Let's get on top of it now, so then it doesn't become something in the future that not just our college is going to suffer with, but every school is going to suffer with. Like, the digital age is creating all these new issues, and I wouldn't want to be a young person again trying to navigate that. I've got 3 kids, and I had a conversation with my wife the other day saying, you know what, our kids are not having mobile phones until they're 18, and maybe even not off that. And obviously it's a joke, but it is such a space where if we don't act really, really quickly, because let's be honest, the kids work faster than us. When we talk to our staff on Monday about the digital space, I said to most of our staff, I said, you may know some of this, you may not, but I can tell you right now, every single one of the kids that you teach are an expert in this field because they're living in this area. So we need to get ahead of it so that we can actually help them, or a greater understanding of it so we can help them. So I feel like that the real-time data, the ability to intersect yourself then and there, is potentially putting out spot fires and preventing damage that we will never ever know about if we actually deal with it then and there.
If I can jump in and add on that, it's more about exactly what Andrew was saying, but that full picture, that understanding that I don't know part of the story, but now the whole story. And the more I know, as the trusted adult, or the person in that position who's ready to respond, the better I am, or better equipped I am to respond to that. And I think more so, especially again, we'll go back to that digital age, but that's exactly the battles that we are living in. Before, we used to tell kids to go find out some information, they just to jump on Google. Now they'll come up with some stories with how they, AI told me this and AI told me this. So it's a challenge both in the academic space and in the wellbeing space. But having that information there and then really quickly is just a click of a button on my dashboard. I see 1,300 kids and where we're at as a school. What is that talking to? What do I need to address now? What do I need to keep an eye on? So that big picture and that real full picture is something that I think can't be optional. If you want to be proactive, if you want to be there for the complexity of things that the kids face on a day-to-day, and for every child, no 2 days are the same. One day they'll be on cloud 9, the next day they are at their lowest point, and things just change so much so quickly. Having that information puts us in a position of addressing priorities and where we need to shift energy, and then being able to understand the whole picture so that we know the support avenues. I know I can put hand on heart, when I was working in the year advisor level, I didn't have all the answers to all the things that my students came up with. But acknowledging that is the case, and then ensuring I'm able to put support networks in place for them.
I'm still smiling. Well, no, because I think, we started off talking about, so many things, but the big thing is the world has changed. The world has changed, and we need to change with it. And our systems, the way that we were before, didn't allow us. I love when you talked about, being able to jump onto a dashboard and see the whole school, and you can click, across all of the classes and have a look. Oh, who might be my little people that need help? Who might a teacher? Which teacher might need a little bit of help and resourcing? Or do I need to send someone down there today, or do I need to pop down there right now? And I think it's not only supporting our young people, but again, coming back to that support and that structure around our teachers as well, so that we can get in there and intervene in time. I know that, people, when they look at Life Skills Go, I don't think there's ever been a school that says, no, we don't want that, because it's not something that they're going to go, no, we don't want student voice. No, we don't want preventative data. But what they do come up against is, oh, we don't have time, or we can't take our school on this journey. And I remember saying to you, go really slow, be deliberate, and be consistent. They're the 3 things that we say. nonstop. But I'm going to start with Claudia this time, not because you speak too much, Andrew.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, right, Nix. What would you, as a leader, say? It's term 3, it's a great time to be evaluating programs, even doing a trial. What would you say to leaders looking at bringing in something new? What would be your top tip, Claudia?
Embrace the data-driven decisions. You come across more authentic. You come across very visionary if you've got the beef to back what you're saying, and that's really important. And leading by example. If you show a commitment to the compassion you wish to see in others, the willingness to connect and build those relationships between teachers and teachers, teacher parent, teacher student, then that will start to feed through. You end up bringing people along rather than standing from the back and pushing them forward. And that's what I find has been something that we've been working on, and understanding and acknowledging we're not going to win everybody, and that's okay. But if the more people we bring along the journey with us, that's been the biggest, I think, shift in culture, and understanding that culture doesn't happen overnight and it does take time, and we're still navigating that at our school like any other school. But yeah, the biggest change, I suppose, and biggest shift that's been really helpful in the way we've driven engagement and pastoral activities at school is because now we have another layer of data that really talks to our kids, because it's from our kids, that really drives on a path which is very clearly aligned now to our wellbeing framework. So everything we do, we can tie to where we're heading. And that constant evaluation and improvement from ourselves as leaders, Andrew and I constantly like, oh, this isn't working. What can we do? What can we change? And then inviting the dialogue, not to say we've made the decision, Andrew or I, or sister or Ellie. It's, what do you think about this scenario, and what are some strategies you can bring to the table? Really empowering teachers as leaders too. And that's what we hope to continue to model and drive at our school.
Claudia, you have such a way with words. I don't think I've ever smiled this much in a webinar in my life, and I'm not just saying that. Andrew, can you beat that?
I like how actually, no, I think I'm going to hand over the person who can talk the most to Claudia, because I think she can definitely talk underwater, on the same level I can. And you know what, I can't beat that, because
Mm,
I agree with everything she said.
mm,
It is about knowing your context, knowing your community. We talk about all your students being known, valued, and cared for, and that's another Department of Education term. But it is
It's true.
it's true. It's knowing not just the children that walk in your uniform and sit in your class and hand their work in, or complete with their work with diligence. It's what is really happening in your community, potentially below the surface, and you don't get to that without forming the connection and forming the relationships. And Claudia touched on, which is part of our mission and vision, is accompanying our students. So it's accompanying our families, walking beside them, um, giving them a slight push here and there, the direction that we see that they should go. But then realistically, whatever decision they make, knowing that we're side by side with them, whether that is the students, whether that is the parents, whether that is the staff. So forming real relationships, real rapport, for me, that is the bread and butter of education. It's lifelong learning. We talk about year 13. We're getting our kids ready for year 13, because once they're gone, they will still circumnavigate, come back, and remember what they've learned, what they've experienced in our setting. And I think we're very fortunate to be kinder to year 12. That was one of the big reasons that I was drawn to come across, because you've really got 13 years of impact in you, in a young person's life, which is tremendous. And 13 years of working with a family, with a community. Yeah, it's outstanding when you really sit back and think about it. Even when you're tired and you come home and you go, you know what, I've got to get up and I've got a million emails, I've got to program this. But if you just sit back for a moment and go, you know what, we're actually making a difference in people's lives here. That's what I know keeps us moving forward and keeps us pushing and driving. And one other thing I'll say is, you're not always going to get it right, but having the ability to pivot and having the team around you to bounce off. Because, as I said, we're very fortunate in our college to have Sister Margaret and Eliasma, who are very generous in allowing us to work in this space, and very fortunate to have an executive and middle leaders who are passionate in this space. So coming to work is pretty easy, even though there's challenging times. The people that you work with, knowing that if you need to pivot, that they've got your back. It's very much a team environment. So yeah, I'll stop talking now.
And Ellie's just popped a beautiful, beautiful message into the chat. You just gave me goosebumps, Ellie. I just want to say thank you for that and for sharing those beautiful words.
The boss here, I didn't even know that. I would have plugged him a little bit more.
There we go. Well, there's all these sneaky people there. But I hope that you're leaving feeling really proud of the incredible work that your whole community is doing, and particularly for the leadership. Tonight, what I really heard was strong leadership and strong direction. And, every school needs that, like being able to take in the voices of your teachers, the voices of your families, the voices of your students, because you are a community. But that unwavering commitment to leading, showing the way, informing, being curious, pivoting, acknowledging that sometimes we make mistakes because we're human, and we'll model that too, because that's another really important lesson in life. But I've loved working beside both of you, and very excited about this targeted intervention. I'll be here back in your school soon around the small groups, because we have something in our backpack that might be ready for you now. We've always got the next little thing for you. But I just want to say a huge thank you. Those of you that have joined, if you wouldn't mind filling out the survey that Isha's popped into the chat. And once again, I look forward to continuing this journey and really just hearing the next steps, and looking forward to supporting you and also walking beside you. One of the things that really was activated in me when I heard you say, one of your values was accompanying, was I had this great sense of empathy. This, like, when I think about walking beside, not walking behind, not walking in front, but deeply understanding somebody else and understanding our families. And I can hand on say that you do that for every single student every day, that you really do know how they are. And I imagine that then gets translated into your communities, and your families are extremely lucky to have the work. And it's, you put a lot of work in. So congratulations. And I look forward to the next iteration. I think we'll just have to do an annual review here on where we're at. But thank you. And thank you for all the work that you tirelessly put in as well. Have a beautiful evening, and thank you for volunteering your time and jumping on here. And we look forward to hearing more about your college.
No worries. Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thanks
Take
so much.
care. Thank you so much.